I'm sharing this story from the United States, where I'm observing the power of human dignity through this tale of humility and consequence. It all began on a crisp Monday morning when Don Ezekiel, an elderly man with silver hair and a weathered face etched with life's trials, stepped into a bustling downtown bank branch. His clothes were modest, faded trousers, a worn jacket, but his eyes sparkled with clarity and quiet determination. In his trembling hands, he clutched a tattered folder stuffed with crumpled documents, each page carrying the weight of a monumental purpose. Unknown to the bank's staff, Ezekiel was no ordinary customer. He was the father of Matthias Echevarria, the CEO of one of the continent's most powerful investment firms, sent on a discreet mission to test the bank's treatment of everyday clients before sealing a $3 billion deal. Ezekiel shuffled toward the counter, his heart beat with a mix of hope and nervous anticipation. He'd promised his son he'd carry out this task with the same integrity that had defined his life. But the moment he approached, Veronica, the branch manager, a sharply dressed woman in her 40s with a cold, dismissive air, fixed her gaze on him. Her lips curled into a sneer before he could even speak. "Sir, we handle queries like yours online," she snapped, her voice dripping with condescension. "We don't have time to explain basic things here." Ezekiel's weathered hands tightened around his folder, his voice soft but steady. "I'm here on behalf of my son for a corporate investment inquiry," he began, trying to offer the documents. Veronica cut him off with a raised hand, her manicured nails glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You're in the wrong place," she said sharply. "This bank isn't a charity." Snickers rippled through the nearby employees, their laughter stabbing at Ezekiel's pride. A security guard hovered nearby, his presence looming like a shadow, but he didn't intervene. Yet, the air grew heavy with tension. Veronica's eyes raked over Ezekiel's humble attire, her voice rising with cruel mockery. "Look at you, with your messy papers and cheap clothes. Do you really think someone like you belongs here?" In a venomous gesture, she kicked the folder from his hands, sending papers fluttering to the floor like wounded birds. Gasps echoed faintly from other customers, but no one dared speak. Ezekiel's knees creaked as he knelt to gather his scattered documents, each movement a quiet battle against the weight of humiliation. His breath grew labored, not from age alone, but from the sting of being rendered invisible. Still, he whispered to himself, "My son won't believe this," his voice trembling with restrained sorrow. The words sparked cruel laughter from a young teller behind the counter. "Oh, sure. And I bet you own the building too, right?" he jeered, emboldened by Veronica's disdain. She waved a hand at the guards. "Get this vagabundo out of here before he bothers anyone else," she barked. Two security guards approached, their faces blank, but their steps deliberate. Ezekiel tried once more, holding up a crumpled paper bearing his son's company logo. "Please, just look at this," he pleaded, his voice cracking with quiet desperation. One guard snatched the paper, crumpled it without a glance, and tossed it to the floor. "Move, or we'll make you," he said coldly to a woman in line. Her face flushed with unease, stepped forward hesitantly. "Why not just listen to him?" she murmured. Veronica whirled on her, eyes blazing. "I'm in charge here. If you want trouble, you can leave with him." The woman shrank back, her courage snuffed out. Ezekiel stood slowly, clutching his battered papers, his face a mask of dignity despite the ache in his chest. He wasn't just facing rejection. He was witnessing the raw cruelty of a world that judged worth by appearances. Veronica leaned in, her voice a venomous hiss. She whispered loud enough for all to hear, "You lying old man. If you had any power, you wouldn't look like a beggar." The words cut deeper than any blade, silencing the room. The guards moved to escort him out, one gripping his arm as the glass doors swung open. But Ezekiel paused at the threshold, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Today, I'm not the CEO," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "But tomorrow, I'll return as the owner." Veronica's dry laugh shattered the silence. "Owner? You're delusional. Get him out," she ordered. The guards ushered Ezekiel outside, his steps slow but resolute. On the sidewalk, he sank onto a public bench, his chest tight with grief. Not for himself, but for the truth he'd uncovered. The bank had revealed its soul, and it was rotten. 2 hours later, Matthias Echevarria, a man whose name commanded boardrooms, answered his father's call. Ezekiel's voice, usually warm, was heavy with disappointment. "They treated me like garbage, son," he said, recounting how they'd mocked him, trampled his papers, and thrown him out. Matthias's heart burned with fury, but also with pride for his father's unshaken dignity. Without hesitation, he canceled a critical meeting with the bank's board and fired off an email to the bank's president, demanding an urgent audit. Unbeknownst to the branch, Ezekiel's ordeal had been recorded as part of Matthias's ethical test of the bank's values. The next morning, Ezekiel returned, no longer alone. Flanked by 2 sharply dressed lawyers, a press assistant, and Matthias himself, casual in jeans but radiating quiet authority, he stepped into the branch. Veronica's smug expression faltered as she recognized the vagabundo from yesterday. The air shifted. The guard stood frozen, sensing something monumental. Matthias strode to the counter, placing a sleek folder before Veronica. "I'm Matthias Echevarria, CEO of Echevarria Capital," he said, his voice calm but piercing. "I'm here to close a deal, not with you, but about you." Veronica's face drained of color. "This is a mistake," she stammered. One of the lawyers stepped forward, his tone measured but unrelenting. "Yesterday, this branch violated every protocol of respect and inclusion. It's all on record. We've filed a formal complaint, and the $3 billion partnership is terminated." Veronica's knees buckled as the weight of her actions crashed down. The staff, once quick to laugh, now stood silent, their eyes darting nervously. Matthias turned to his father, his voice softening with reverence. "This was always your deal, Papa." Ezekiel, seated with quiet grace, looked at Veronica. "You didn't see my worth because I wasn't wearing a suit," he said, his voice steady but laced with sorrow. "What a shame." Outside, news vans gathered, tipped off by an insider. Cameras captured Ezekiel's composed recounting of the ordeal, while Veronica's career unraveled in real time. The bank issued a frantic statement, suspending Veronica and promising reforms, but the damage was done. Her name became synonymous with arrogance, trending online alongside hashtags of justice and accountability. Matthias, in a televised interview, spoke not of money, but of his father's lesson. Greatness is how you treat those who seem to offer nothing. Ezekiel, once invisible, became a beacon. Invited to speak at universities and financial forums, he shared his story, his voice resonating with millions who'd felt dismissed. Veronica faced lawsuits and public disgrace, her legacy a cautionary tale. Ezekiel, however, emerged as more than a CEO's father. He became a symbol of dignity's quiet power. Never judged by appearances, for respect and humanity are non-negotiable. If you're enjoying this story, give it a like, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. I'm watching from the USA, where stories like this remind us of the strength and humility.